You're listening to the People's Podcast.
Have you ever been unemployed? Were you nervous then?
Yeah.
All right, then.
This is JSC Radio.
So this is JSC Radio, and as I've mentioned for the better part of the last week, I finally have a guest on this show. So it's not just me screaming into an echo chamber, and I've got the perfect person here. Now, first half of the show, I talked about how there were two things the last month that I have just been transfixed on. One was the NBA Finals, and running almost concurrently was the documentary OJ Made in America. Every time I would see Chris Darden, I couldn't help but think to myself, how in the hell did I have his daughter as a really good friend of mine for 6 years and not realize that she's his daughter? Well, I've got her here right now. So my first guest, the first ever guest on JSC Radio, she is more than just Chris Darden's daughter. She's an accomplished journalist, an author, an advocate for mental health, and just an overall wonderful person. Jenee Darden, welcome to JSC Radio as my first guest.
Oh, I'm so excited to be your first guest. Thank you for having me.
Coming to us all the way from the Bay.
Yes, and you brought up the NBA Finals. Don't talk about it.
Well, look, remember, I'm from Detroit, too, and nothing burns me more than seeing a team from that city win a championship. That just didn't. I talked about that last week. It's like I was salty. I was the saltiest dog on the planet watching the Cavaliers win. I hated that because actually I dig the Warriors. It's like the Bay Area was always on my mind anyway. I love the Bay.
Yeah.
I've mentioned that to you before, and just getting to talk to you here and really getting a chance to kind of get who you are out there, because I know, and we'll get to the work that your father has done and everything with OJ in a second, but just with you, it's like when I look up and down at your resume here, I'm actually like blown away by it, because you've done work for NPR and you've done stuff for Time Magazine and the LA Times and Ebony and Marketplace and the Huffington Post, and also done stuff for the Southern Poverty Law Center. I guess the first question I have to ask you is, what got you interested in being a journalist? I ask every journalist this question. What got you into wanting to join this crazy business of ours?
I didn't know it was crazy before I wanted to do it. I always wanted to be a journalist. It was nothing. I don't think anything in particular. I've always liked to write. My mother gave me a journal when I was about 7, and I've been keeping a journal and writing since. So that kind of maybe sparked my interest in writing. And then when I got a little older, my grandmother bought me a tape recorder. So I used to try to record my family members and interview them. I was the only child growing up, so I would record my stuffed animals and interview them. So it was always kind of just something that I wanted to do. I just always was fascinated about interviewing people, and when I was 12, I used to watch 60 Minutes. I don't know how many 12-year-olds watch 60 Minutes.
I'm Morley Safer.
Huh?
I was like, I'm Morley Safer. I'm Mike Wallace. I'm Ed Bradley.
Yeah, I used to say, and I'm Jenee Darden. This and more with 60 Minutes.
This and Andy Rooney. You also had a podcast. You also had a podcast. It says you're the former host of the Mental Health and Wellness Radio. Now, I guess explain how that podcast ran, and see that you won an award for it and everything else.
Yes, you were a guest.
I was a guest. Full disclosure, I was a guest on the show as well. I mean, people haven't guessed. I've got problems in my head to begin with, but it's and
Who does?
So what inspired the Mental Health and Wellness Radio?
So I was hired to work at a nonprofit in Oakland, and I heard the words that most journalists would love to hear. We want you to start a show and do whatever you want. I was like, really?
Those are famous last words to certain people.
I said I can do whatever I want. So, and the podcast was funded by our county, Alameda County, and so. Again, the nonprofit was a mental health advocacy nonprofit in Oakland. And so what I wanted to focus on, because I think mental health people focus more on mental illness, and mental health gets such a bad rap. Honestly, when we usually talk about mental health is when there's a shooting or something like that. And, in my opinion, mental health is not about violence. So I wanted to interview people who are living with mental health conditions and they're managing their mental health. And I wanted real conversations about mental health. I didn't want anything sensational or to scare people. I wanted for people to learn about mental health, and I wanted for people who have mental health challenges or they have loved ones with mental health challenges to be inspired. So that's why I had all kind of people on, and I had journalists on. You know, I had all different type of professionals on who were dealing with mental health challenges.
And how long did that show run?
So I was at that organization for about, how long was I there? 4 years. So we, you know, it was nonprofit, so I didn't have a huge budget where I could do a show every week. I would have loved to have done that, but over the course I was there, which was about 4 years, that's how long we had the podcast. And wonderfully, I got my first journalism award doing that podcast. So my very first journalism award.
It's probably the first of many.
Well, to come, I hope.
There you go. Hey, we keep it positive around here.
To come, yes, the first of many to come.
Exactly.
So, but I've gotten other honors since then. But yeah, I thought it was really neat. I said, wow, something I created my own, and I actually beat out major radio stations in the Bay Area and won an award. So I thought that was really neat.
It sounds like it. I guess. Well, you grew up in Oakland, right?
Yes, sir.
What was it? What was it like growing up in Oakland? We're both about the same age. I think we are the same age, actually. So what was it like being an 80s baby growing up in the Bay?
Yeah, growing up in Oakland in the 80s, so I was the only child. I'm my mother's only child. And so my father had more children once I turned 18. So I was the only girl in the family for a long time and the only child. So if you can imagine.
Oh, wow. As an only child myself, I totally understand the struggle, by the way.
I know, we have so much in common. It's like we kind of grew up the same. Our names start with J. We both have Sigma in our organizations.
You know.
Yeah. But it was you know, I was sometimes overprotected. My mother was a single mother, so she was really, really looking after me. So I don't hold it too much against her. But growing up in the 80s was fun. I mean, it's not like today. You know, you deal with so much today, so much pressure and you know, violence and all that kind of stuff. Even though I did grow up in Oakland during, you know, the whole crack epidemic. So just growing up around some of the shootings and things like that. But other than that, you know, it was fun just to be with family, and we would travel, and my family migrated from the South, so, and they all lived within like a few miles of each other. So just going to barbecues and family parties and was just fun. And then I had friends on the street, and we would run around the street and play. I mean, it was good. It had its challenges sometimes, but it was good.
What were some of those challenges out there? And every place has something different. Detroit had its thing with, it had gang issues, and there were certain streets you didn't venture onto. It's like that even now. And there were certain streets you didn't venture onto. And
oh yeah, still streets I don't venture onto. You know, but I mean, yeah, that's how it was in Oakland. It was like which streets you didn't venture onto at a certain time of night. Because, you know, bullets may be flying or fights. You know, those streets may be prone for that kind of activity. So those were some of the issues. And again, I grew up in my mother was a single parent, and that's not always easy. And then I was bullied a lot when I was younger, and I write about that a lot because I was darker skinned, black girl, and nerdy. And I went to a predominantly black Catholic school. So I got bullied tremendously. And it actually affected my mental health, which is also the reason why I did the podcast. So those are some of my major struggles, was just self-esteem and self-worth. And my mother she really had to really watch me and really kind of undo some of the brainwashing society does about black girls and our images and that kind of stuff. I made a video on my Facebook page for my blog, cocofly.com, and it was about those pictures that came out about with little Kim, and she looked so much lighter than what she used to be. And I talked about how I had a lot of sympathy for her and compassion for her, because if my mother had snatched me and really talked to me and put really positive images of black women, I might have been doing something similar, you know, so to alter my appearance, because I just had such low self-esteem because I was being bullied. So that's when I say the struggles, you know, were there in that respect. But other than that, My dad has support. So.
You hear of kids going through a lot of bullying these days. I guess now with the change in our culture here in the United States, people actually take kids being bullied very seriously. It was something I dealt with. I was always too skinny. When you have a voice that sounds like this, and
you're like, and you're 10, you sounded like that when you're a little boy.
Yeah, when you have a voice like this, and you grow up in a city like Detroit or a city like Oakland, you're gonna hear it and you're gonna get it. You got to learn to either try to push it off to the side or you got to throw hands. And I got to a certain age where I got tired of throwing hands, so you got to kind of work with that. But kids are really being pushed these days because of bullies, and now there's the extra dynamic of social media where they can bully you. You see it on Twitter all the time. People get way out of pocket knowing they don't have to face you. It's a different element.
Absolutely, I know
the cyber thugs, the cyber thugs, the Twitter tough guys, and. You see that, and it does take a toll on kids' mental health. I guess
I couldn't imagine some of the things kids did to me and said to me, and they put that on Twitter or on Facebook. That would be detrimental. So I feel bad for kids, or like you see kids putting naked pictures of other kids up on the internet, and I feel bad that for kids going through that. I'm glad I didn't grow up in the era of social media.
And when we think about that, and I guess there's no real great segue into this, but how much of the 30 for 30 documentary on OJ have you seen?
I've only seen episode 1, so I'm behind. I need to see that. I do need to see the rest, but from what I've seen, it's amazing. Just the first episode is just amazing. But there was a part in there that talked about something you wanted to bring up.
Yeah, I mean, the whole.
I read some of it, so you like to bring it up.
The thing about it is, and I guess we'll kind of start this on different levels. Is first off, I guess, what was your relationship like as a kid before all this with your father?
So my father left for LA. He grew up in the Bay Area. He grew up in Richmond, California, which is not far from Oakland and not far from San Francisco either. It's interesting with that documentary because O.J. Simpson, my father, and I, in a way, kind of, I don't want to say cross paths because there's age differences, but we kind of all were in similar settings. I went to USC. O.J. went to USC. My father went to San Jose State. O.J. got accepted to San Jose State. We all lived in the Bay Area. So just be watching the first episode, I understood a lot what was going on. But back to my father, he left when I was about one, maybe a little younger than that. And he took a job in LA. So our relationship, it was a long distance relationship in the sense that I saw him probably maybe a few times a year. We did communicate a lot, like over the phone and through letters, and he would come and visit. But I didn't grow up with him in the house. And we still had a good relationship. I think the fact that he lived long distance, we made it work. Him and my mother were always in contact with each other.
So obviously as you got older, you obviously had a relationship with your dad. So as we progress along here, he becomes this lawyer. He is this lawyer down in Los Angeles, and he ends up a part of the trial.
Right.
And again, it's interesting when I look at it just from my perspective. I saw the entire documentary, and it was like it was just taking me back. It was just rewinding everything back to the early 90s, and I'm coming of age as a teenager in Detroit, a city that's got its own issues, and you're watching this from afar, not understanding that there's a real human toll to this. So when it comes up that your dad is part of the prosecution team for OJ, and people start to figure out who you are. You mentioned you dealt with bullying before and dealt with issues before. How was it for you dealing with that during the mid-90s, where now your dad is a household name and people start to peg who you are?
It was interesting. It was challenging, and it could have been worse. So I'm grateful for that. I went to a predominantly Black and Latino high school, Phil Mustang, St. Elizabeth High School in Oakland, and people started putting one and one together, because they're like, he's from Richmond, last name Darden, they both wear glasses. We both got full lips. They're like, Are you related to that bald-headed dude? So that's what you're like, you related to that bald-headed Black dude? So, people were starting to put one and one together, and we had to, my parents had to alert the school what was going on because my father started receiving death threats. So at first, you know, I mean, it was just this whole Bronco chase. All that was crazy, right?
Yeah.
And so then my dad was supposed to prosecute Al Cowlings, and then they dropped that, and so then he got moved to the OJ trial. I can't remember the gentleman's name, but he was a co-prosecutor, Marsha Clark. And if you saw the dramatization, the FX show, The People versus OJ, he had an anxiety attack, and so he couldn't do it. And so he asked my father to replace him. So that's how my father got involved. Well, even before that, my dad was working on the case, but more working behind the scenes. And then they pulled him to the front because the other guy had a anxiety attack. But you know, we were excited for him. We thought we were like, oh, this is going to be great. This will be good for your career. And if my father felt O.J. Simpson was guilty, then that's why he also was on the case too. But we had no idea it would turn into this big snowball, sensationalized, this craziness. And luckily, a lot of the kids at the school I went to, they said, we're siding with OJ, but we like you. We always thought you were cool, so we're gonna support you too. So luckily, I didn't have too much bullying or anything. I got a few dirty looks, a few nasty comments, but other than that, it could have been worse. People were very, very supportive, and it's funny because since the documentary stuff has come out, I've had someone apologize to me for giving me dirty looks and kind of saying, not being very nice to me and that kind of stuff. They had no idea what we were experiencing, but it was hard, because my father got ripped in the media at times, and
Black
it was
community.
hard, and I lived in the Black community. I lived in the Black community, and both of my parents always encouraged me to be proud of my Blackness. And it's funny because people are surprised when I say that. Both of them, my father included, very much encouraged me to be proud of my Blackness, and would buy me books by Black authors, and would take me to Black bookstores, and my father would introduce me to Black professionals, or Black journalists, just so I can see myself doing the same thing. So it was very hard to hear somebody come to me and say, "Your father, Uncle Tom, your father, a traitor to the race." So that was very, very hard. And then I was kind of like the girl in the I forgot the name of that cartoon. What's the name of the Disney cartoon when they're all superheroes?
Oh, the Incredibles.
The Incredibles. Yeah, I was like the teenage girl. I wanted to disappear. It was I just wanted to be invisible because it just became, very hyper visible. Sometimes I would tell people my name. I wouldn't tell them my last name because I knew they would make the connection, especially during the trial. I would lie. People asked. I would say, "Oh no, I'm not related to him."
That was the funny thing is that when I met you, because in full disclosure, I met you 6 years ago.
Did you ask me? I probably lied to you too.
You know what? I don't think I even thought to ask because I guess I've seen people who've had. I went to high school with a young lady whose last name was Darden, and clearly I'm like, well, she ain't related to him, so I don't think those sort of things. And it was, I think you put up either a Facebook post or a tweet where you mentioned, I think you did this thing in the LA Times. And my jaw damn near hits the floor. Wait a minute. And I looked at, and I see that, and then I took one good look at you. Then I took a look at your dad. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me with this.
You like glasses,
everything. Everything. I was stunned. And you brought up another point there where you said people were giving your dad grief about prosecuting OJ, where it seemed as if there was this notion that since he's Black, he can't do his job because his job was to be a lawyer and to be a prosecutor. And I guess that might lead to something here where, doesn't it seem weird, I guess, in our community that at times we feel like we all have to operate in this monolith, like we can't always think for ourselves, and that's what leads to some of the Uncle Tom stuff and the you're a traitor even though you're doing your job and you're doing what you're supposed to do type of thing?
Right, yeah, no, it's like we're not a monolith, and I agree, and we do have diversity of opinion, and because your dad's a cop, right?
Yeah, my dad was a police officer. He was a police officer in Detroit for about 33 years.
See, that's why I said we have similar. See,
Your dad's a lawyer. Mine was in law enforcement. It's it's how.
But both our dads' roles, the black community looks at it differently, and I understand. I totally, and I like I wrote in the LA Times piece. I understood. I understood. Rodney King and all that kind of stuff, and the sister who was shot by the Korean merchant over orange juice. I understand. I grew up in Oakland, so police brutality and all that kind of stuff. I understood. People were angry. But we still need cops, and we still need good cops. And it's funny because I did a piece on Ebony, and I asked my father, "Do we need black prosecutors?" And he said yes, because he said you need people, you need people that understand culture, and maybe a prosecutor who understands black culture and isn't racist. They're not gonna throw the book at a kid for stealing, some tennis shoes, and not try and lock them up for years. You know what I'm saying?
Mm-hmm.
So he was saying you need those kind of people in the system too. And I love black folks, but some of us do commit crimes. And then at the same time, the justice system is racially unfair to many of us. So So I'm kind of looking at it from both sides, and it's funny because I talked to my father about this, and he was like, he's put away gangbangers and all kind of stuff, and that were black, and nobody came protesting at those cases when he did that. I mean, he's kind of like, why be outraged when there's a celebrity involved too as well. So, and I had this one brother, he messaged me on Facebook because my father prosecuted somebody who killed his friend. Can you imagine this? Think about this. Knowing what we know today, somebody killed his friend over a portable CD player.
Which, if you change that to 2016, you get shot over an iPhone.
Right. Somebody killed him, right, the equivalent of an iPhone. And it's just sad because I'm like, nobody even uses those anymore. Yeah, and this guy, he was black, and he was like, he said, I know people gave your father a hard time, but somebody killed my friend, and he put him away. So, I mean, those are just things to think about. But like I said, I understand why black people are upset, and I understand why they sided with OJ. I understand.
How's your dad doing?
He's good. He's a defense attorney now. People say he joined the dark side.
He switched sides.
Well, a lot of attorneys do that. They go from prosecution to defense, so that's not uncommon.
I know he went through a lot. Mm-hmm. He went through a lot, and this is another. And I know you put up with a lot of crap as a teenager, because by the time this happened, we were both 15, 16 years old when this thing ended. You're dealing with these media members and the paparazzi and the gossip rags and all that calling you and bringing all these rumors and all this right. and all this BS to you. How are you able to, I guess, handle that? What is that like when you're getting, which this is still the mid 90s, so it's not like you're getting text messages, but you're getting like phone calls or people showing up at your house. How did you cope with that? How did your family cope with that?
Well, like I tell people, it's like you just imagine you're a regular person. Nobody knows who you are. Nobody knows anybody related to you. And all of a sudden, you're getting paparazzi. And you don't live in L.A. You don't live in Hollywood. You don't live in New York City. You just live in like a regular town. And all of a sudden, people are coming to your door. I had my own phone, and people were calling. Somebody called, and they were like, we want to know about you. Want to tell us something about your daddy? So I'm like hanging up on people. I had an aunt. I was like, what? I had an aunt. She, by marriage, she sold my winter ball picture to a tabloid. So, I joked because the tabloid, I think the type, like something in the tabloid said, Jenee Darden is like always chasing off boys. And I was mad because it wasn't true. And I was like, I wish, So I was like, you put saw my picture, and then you put in this stuff that I wish was true at the time. So I didn't like that. That actually turned me off to media and journalism for a long time. I didn't like how the media handled the trial, and I said, I was like, I'll never be a journalist. They're no good. for a long time, and then I changed my mind. But that was very hard. You know, my mom had to, at first they were saying, well, you know, you can't go out anymore till the trial is over. Okay, the trial was like 9 months, 8 months. And I was like, wait a minute, I need to have a life, you know. So I was kind of like this. Like, I was mad because I was like, this thing is messing with my life, and I had nothing to do with it.
And you're not even in L.A. You're in Oakland.
I was like, I'm not in L.A. And I was like, I ain't kill nobody. You know when you're a kid. I was like, I don't even live in L.A. I ain't kill nobody. Why I gotta go out with my friends? You know, and because they were worried because my dad was getting death threats, and so, and then my dad felt guilty because that was going on, and my uncle was dying of AIDS, and the paparazzi was harassing him, and I remember somebody called my grandparents, were like, how do you feel about your son dying of AIDS? You know, and it's like, how the hell you think we feel, you know? Right. I mean, it was just a lot of this insensitivity, but I didn't realize part of this was because I learned years later from people today that people watched the trial like it was a show, and so they saw the people there, the key figures, as characters and not really as real people. So, and I know my father, I've heard people say, oh, he looks so defeated and worn out, and I'm thinking like, well, yeah, because he wasn't just coming home and going to the trial, and that was it, and they shut down the set. You know, that was an actual real courtroom, and he had things going on. He's in L.A., he feels bad because paparazzi is hounding his brother who is dying of AIDS, and hounding our grandparents, and hounding me, and then I may not be able to go out as much. I mean, so he's feeling some guilt too about that. You know, that he kind of, you know, his overnight celebrity kind of affected us. So all of that, you know, it was hard. It was hard. It was hard to see him go through what he went through.
You don't seem to harbor any ill will toward people after all this, though. That's what I'm gathering. You have a really positive outlook, and now we're more than 20 years out from this thing. You seem to be a lot more at ease with some of this now as the years have gone on and the things that have happened with OJ and everything else. I don't detect that you're harboring a lot of ill will toward anybody after this.
Well, I mean,
or I could be totally wrong.
I was angry for a long time. I will admit that, and because it changed our lives. And you know, my father, you know, he got a book deal and all that kind of stuff. And so sometimes when people, not sometimes, probably pretty much all the time, sometimes when people come into money and fame, people act differently. So just dealing with that, you know, people would treat me differently, or maybe I had some family members that were kind of hating on me because they thought I had it all now because my father was famous. So if I had ill will with that, it was maybe towards those people, maybe people that were close to me that stabbed me in the back. But I've since let that go because anger is very toxic, and I learned that. It's very toxic, and it will eat you away. And I'm not saying you don't have the right to be angry, but when you hold on to it for years and years and years and years, you know, it's not good for you. So I've let a lot of stuff go. You know, I hate how people saw my father and how they treated him. I'm thankful today because the documentary and the miniseries, they really gave people an insight into kind of what he experienced. Like I said, the FX show, not all of it is totally accurate, but it kind of humanized my father and Marsha Clark. Because they weren't, I don't think, humanized during the trial. And so I'm grateful because people, again, there have been people contacting me who still support the defense. And I don't argue with if OJ's guilty or not. It's just, you know, that's like the chicken or the egg or arguing religion. I don't really get into all of that. But there are people who supported the defense. And they said, you know what, I still think OJ is not guilty, but I think your father, you know, was done wrong. And I just want to let you know that. And I appreciate that people have even said that. So I'm grateful that people are looking at it differently. And then, too, I understand, like, again, why there was such a backlash from the black community. I don't excuse it, but I understand. Because I think if I didn't understand, I would be angry.
What's next for you after all the things you've done? What is next on your plate?
So much not related to OJ. It's funny. It's just interesting how life is interesting. You never know what's going to happen or what's going to affect you or change things. And sometimes things happen that change for the better. It's not always dramatic and crazy. But so I have a lot. I'm working on a book proposal that I'm finishing up for a long time. I've been researching Black erotic literature. That is something I'm very passionate about. And you want to hear the story?
Of course.
Sure. Of course. We can talk about OJ, trial, and sex. Two interesting topics for your listeners. So, when I was a junior, I was a junior at UC San Diego. I think going into my senior year. And I was in a research program, kind of like McNair, but not quite. And so I had to find a topic. I didn't know what I wanted to do research on. And so I went to school in San Diego in La Jolla. And La Jolla is one of the wealthiest cities in the country, so which means there's hardly no black people there. And so I was at a bookstore that was going out of business, Crown's bookstore. And there was a bin of discounted books. And so I'm going through the bin, and I pick up a book, and I see this black woman. She's partially nude, so her arms are crossed over her breasts. And it's called Brown Sugar Collection, erotic literature, or something like that. And I was like, oh, that's probably some Harlequin thing. And it was only $4. So I was like, okay, I can do $4 on the student budget. So I buy the book, I open the book, and it's flames shooting off the pages. And I had no idea black people wrote erotica. I had no idea. I mean, Prince wrote some sex and stuff, but I didn't know black people write a lot erotic literature. And so I started studying this. Now, this was back in 2000 when I started doing research, and I found more and more and more and more. So I've been writing about erotic literature and sex. I write a lot about sex, too, sex and race for a while. So I'm shopping it around to get a book deal. So that's the big thing that's next step for me, and this is something I've been passionate about for years. So because usually in school when you learn about black sexuality, you learn about the horrific things that we went through, right? Like how black people were treated during slavery, and HIV rates are high with black people and all that kind of stuff. And so that's very important. But I'm always like, okay, what about pleasure? Let's talk about pleasure and those type of sexual experiences with black culture and with African Americans. So that's what I like writing about.
And you, as we're about to wrap this up, as we've been at this for more than 30 minutes here, how can people reach you? I know you have your blog and you have your website. I guess get your social media info out there. How can people reach you? And obviously, come in peace when you do. But how can people come and actually reach you and talk to you?
So, people, and I also do public speaking too. People can reach me, so of course they can go on cocofly.com. That's COCOA fly.com. They can email me at cocoflyblog@gmail.com. And on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram, I am at cocofly.
One more time for the people. What's the name of that website?
So it's cocofly, COCOA fly.com. And I write about race and sexuality and women's issues. And men are always welcome, and they do come on there. And also, too, for anybody, if they watched The People versus O.J. Simpson, I did a whole series on that as well. So I kind of wrote about what was accurate, what was not quite as accurate on the show. So I'm sure, for people that haven't watched the show yet, if they have questions, I break it down by each episode. So each episode has a post.
I would almost suggest you try to do that for O.J. Made in America, too.
I know, and I was, and then I got bogged down with other stuff, and I still might do that. I still might write. I probably won't do each episode, but I'm gonna write something about it.
Jenee, I appreciate you being my first guest on this show, taking the time to talk to me. This has been just wonderful.
Yes, thank you. Congratulations.
I couldn't do it without you. Couldn't do it without the people who listen. I thank you for this. It's Jenee Darden. She's more than just Chris's daughter. She's a dynamic individual, really good friend of mine, and an unbelievably talented young woman. And I thank you for coming on JSC Radio.
Thank you for having me.
And there you have it. Follow Jenee on Twitter at CocoFly. That's Coco like Cocoa Puffs, COCOA Fly on Twitter. get at her. Be sure to check out cocofly.com and you can see all the work she's done. She's a dynamic individual, not just in terms of professionalism, but just she's a hell of a great person. And I am absolutely proud to call her a friend of mine. Thank y'all once again for listening. Take care of yourself. God bless. Always dare to be different. Always have your pets spayed or neutered. Black Lives Matter. We're out of here. I'll holler at you next week.